The ball hit the ground, the stadium went silent, and in that moment, Cleveland Browns rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders' worst nightmare became reality on national television. A critical fumble on a drive that could have saved their season. Fingers pointing, cameras zooming in, social media exploding with criticism. This was supposed to be his redemption story, his chance to prove he belonged in the NFL after falling to the 5th round. Instead, it looked like another crushing mistake that would define his rookie season. But then, something extraordinary happened in the Browns' locker room, something that doesn't usually happen in the cutthroat world of professional football. Myles Garrett, the highest-paid defensive player in the league, the 4-time All-Pro who's chasing NFL history with his sack record pursuit, stood up and refused to let his young quarterback take the blame. What Garrett said next sent shockwaves through the organization and exposed the kind of leadership that separates championship teams from pretenders. This isn't just about a fumble. This is about a rookie trying to survive in the most unforgiving league in sports, a defensive superstar protecting his teammate when everyone else was ready to pile on, and the brutal reality of what it takes to build a winning culture in Cleveland. If you want the full story of how one fumble turned into a defining moment for the Browns' future, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now.
December 21st, 2024, First Energy Stadium. The Cleveland Browns are locked in a desperate battle that will define their entire season. Every possession matters. Every decision could be the difference between playoff hopes and another disappointing year in a city that's endured decades of quarterback failures and organizational chaos. Shedeur Sanders, the 5th-round rookie who was never supposed to be starting games this early in his career, is under center. The pressure is suffocating. Cleveland's playoff chances are hanging by a thread. Deshaun Watson's situation remains uncertain. The offensive line has been inconsistent all season, and Sanders, son of NFL legend Deion Sanders, is carrying the weight of expectations that no rookie quarterback should ever have to bear alone. But here's what makes this moment so crucial. Shedeur Sanders has actually been playing well. Despite all the criticism, despite being overlooked in the draft, despite the constant comparisons to his Hall of Fame father, he's shown flashes of genuine NFL-caliber quarterback play. His decision-making has been sharp. His pocket presence has impressed coaching staff. And just weeks ago, nobody thought he'd even be in position to start meaningful games for a playoff-contending team. The Browns are driving. It's late in the game, and they need points desperately. Sanders drops back, surveys the defense, and prepares to make a play that could shift momentum. The play call is solid. The protection seems adequate. Everything is set up for success. And then, disaster strikes. Sanders loses the football, not on a violent strip sack, not on a crushing blindside hit that nobody could have prevented. It's a fumble on what should have been a routine play, the kind of turnover that makes coaching staffs furious and drives fan bases absolutely insane. The ball hits the turf, bounces awkwardly, and suddenly the entire stadium is holding its breath as players from both teams scramble for possession. The opposing team recovers. Cleveland's drive is over. Their chances of scoring on that critical possession evaporate in an instant. And Shedeur Sanders, the rookie who was playing with confidence just moments earlier, looks absolutely devastated on the sideline. The cameras immediately cut to his face. You can see it in his eyes, the crushing weight of knowing he just made a catastrophic mistake. The kind of mistake that gets young quarterbacks benched. The kind of mistake that social media will replay endlessly with brutal commentary. The kind of mistake that can haunt a player's confidence for an entire season or longer. But what happened next in the Browns' locker room after that game is what this story is really about. Because in professional football, leadership isn't just about making plays on the field. It's about how teams respond when things go wrong. It's about whether veteran players protect their young teammates or throw them under the bus. It's about the culture an organization builds when nobody's watching. Myles Garrett walked into that locker room as one of the most dominant defensive players in the entire NFL. He's the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. He's pursuing the all-time sack record. He just signed a contract extension that made him the highest-paid defensive player in league history at 5 years and $125 million. When Garrett speaks, people listen. When he takes a stand, it carries weight throughout the entire organization. And Myles Garrett was about to take a stand that would shock everyone who witnessed it. The locker room atmosphere after that game was reportedly tense. Players were frustrated. Coaches were processing what went wrong. Media members were preparing their post-game questions, ready to dissect every mistake and assign blame for another painful loss. Everyone in that building knew the fumble would dominate headlines. Everyone knew Shedeur Sanders would be the target of intense scrutiny, except Myles Garrett, who was preparing to change the entire narrative.
Let's break down exactly what happened on that fumble, because the details matter more than anyone initially realized. This wasn't just a simple mistake by a nervous rookie. This was a complex breakdown that exposed deeper issues with the Cleveland Browns offense. And understanding those issues is crucial to comprehending why Myles Garrett's response was so significant. The play design itself was actually sound. Kevin Stefanski had called a play-action concept designed to get Sanders outside the pocket with multiple options downfield. The offensive line's assignment was clear: create a clean pocket, give the rookie quarterback time to go through his progressions, and protect him from the kind of devastating hits that can rattle a young player's confidence. But here's where things started falling apart. Film review later showed that the left side of Cleveland's offensive line got beat almost immediately. A defensive end came through virtually untouched, forcing Sanders to react faster than the play design intended. Instead of having 3 full seconds to survey the field, Sanders had maybe 1.5 seconds before pressure was in his face. Now, any NFL quarterback will tell you that pressure situations require instantaneous decision-making. You either get rid of the ball quickly, take the sack and protect the football, or try to escape and make something happen. Sanders chose the third option. He tried to evade the pressure, buy time for his receivers to get open, and keep the play alive. That decision, in theory, wasn't wrong. Patrick Mahomes has built an entire Hall of Fame career on extending plays and creating magic when the pocket collapses. Russell Wilson made his reputation doing exactly what Sanders attempted. The problem is that Shedeur Sanders is a rookie, still developing those instincts, still learning how to protect the football while escaping pressure, still figuring out the split-second decisions that separate NFL quarterbacks from college quarterbacks. As Sanders moved to his right, trying to escape, a linebacker came crashing in from his blind side. The contact wasn't catastrophically violent, but it was enough to jar the football loose at the exact moment Sanders was transitioning from scrambling mode to throwing mode. The ball popped out, hit the ground, and Cleveland's chances of winning that drive disappeared instantly. The statistics tell part of the story, but they don't capture the full emotional devastation of what that fumble represented. Sanders had been playing relatively clean football up to that point. His turnover rate was actually better than several veteran quarterbacks around the league. He'd shown the ability to protect the football and make smart decisions under pressure. This fumble was an aberration, a mistake that came more from inadequate protection than from reckless decision-making. But here's the brutal reality of the NFL. Context doesn't matter when you're a rookie quarterback and your team loses. Fans don't care about offensive line breakdowns. Media members don't care about play design flaws. All they see is the fumble, the turnover, and another young quarterback making a critical mistake in a must-win situation. Social media exploded within minutes. Twitter was flooded with criticism of Sanders. Fans were calling him to be benched. Draft analysts were resurrecting their pre-draft critiques about his ability to handle NFL pressure.
Sports talk radio hosts across Cleveland were already preparing their Monday morning segments about whether the Browns made a mistake trusting a fifth-round rookie with their playoff hopes. The narrative was being written in real time. Shedeur Sanders isn't ready for this moment. The Browns should have never put him in this position. Another quarterback controversy in Cleveland. Another season potentially ruined by inadequate play at the most important position in football. But what nobody in that moment understood was that inside the Browns' locker room, a completely different narrative was beginning to take shape. Because while fans and media were piling on Shedeur Sanders, Myles Garrett was watching how his young quarterback was handling the adversity. And what Garrett saw told him everything he needed to know about Sanders' character. Sanders wasn't making excuses. He wasn't blaming the offensive line for the protection breakdown. He wasn't pointing fingers at coaches for the play call. He was sitting at his locker, visibly devastated, taking full responsibility for the turnover. In his post-game media availability, Sanders was brutally honest. He acknowledged the fumble cost his team a crucial possession. He said he needed to do better. He accepted blame without hesitation. That kind of accountability is rare, especially for a rookie quarterback who could have easily deflected blame onto his offensive line or the pressure situation. But Sanders did what leaders do. He owned his mistake, even when there were legitimate mitigating factors that could have provided cover. Myles Garrett, who had been dominant on the defensive side of the ball that entire game, was watching all of this unfold. He saw Sanders taking responsibility. He saw a young quarterback who refused to make excuses, and Garrett made a decision that would define the Browns' locker room culture for the rest of the season. Garrett wasn't going to let his young quarterback face this criticism alone. He wasn't going to allow the narrative to become entirely about Sanders' mistake when there were systemic issues with the offense that needed to be addressed. And most importantly, Garrett understood something that casual fans and media members often miss. Championship teams protect their own, especially when young players are learning how to survive in the NFL.
The media circus that erupted after Shedeur Sanders' fumble was exactly what you'd expect in today's NFL landscape: brutal, immediate, and completely merciless. Within hours, the narrative had already been written, and it wasn't kind to the rookie quarterback who had just made the most costly mistake of his young career. ESPN's analysts wasted no time dissecting every angle of the fumble. They showed the replay in slow motion from multiple camera angles. They froze the frame at the exact moment the ball came loose. They brought in former quarterbacks to analyze Sanders' ball security technique and pocket awareness. The consensus from the talking heads was clear. Sanders made a mental error that cost Cleveland the game, and questions about whether he's truly ready for NFL starting responsibilities were completely justified. Stephen A. Smith, never one to hold back, went on a passionate rant during First Take. He pointed out that the Browns are in a desperate playoff race, that they cannot afford turnover mistakes from their quarterback, and that while Sanders has shown promise, fumbles in critical situations are the kind of errors that get coaches fired and general managers second-guessing their draft decisions. Smith didn't call for Sanders to be benched outright, but he made it clear that the rookie is on thin ice and that Cleveland needs to seriously evaluate whether they can trust him in high-pressure moments moving forward. Skip Bayless took an even harsher stance. He brought up Deion Sanders' legacy and questioned whether Shedeur has the same clutch gene that made his father a Hall of Famer. Bayless suggested that being Deion's son creates unrealistic expectations, but also comes with legitimate scrutiny about whether Sanders can handle the pressure that comes with that famous last name. The fumble, according to Bayless, was evidence that maybe Shedeur isn't built for the biggest moments yet. Cleveland's local media was even more savage. Sports talk radio across the city was flooded with angry callers demanding answers. Why is a fifth-round rookie playing meaningful games for a playoff contending team? Why hasn't the front office provided better quarterback depth? Why does it feel like the Browns are always one mistake away from complete organizational chaos? The frustration wasn't just about the fumble itself. It was about years of accumulated disappointment and the feeling that Cleveland can never get the quarterback position right.
Mary Kay Cabot, who covers the Browns for Cleveland.com, wrote a scathing article breaking down the fumble and its implications for the team's playoff hopes. She quoted anonymous sources within the organization expressing concern about Sanders' ball security fundamentals and whether the coaching staff needs to simplify the playbook to minimize situations where the rookie quarterback is forced into high-risk decisions. The article painted a picture of an organization questioning everything about their quarterback plan. But then something unexpected started happening on social media. While mainstream media was piling on Sanders, a counter-narrative began emerging from players around the league. Current and former NFL players started defending the rookie quarterback, pointing out that the offensive line breakdown forced him into an impossible situation, and that judging a fifth-round rookie's entire future based on one fumble under pressure is reactionary and unfair. Robert Griffin III, the former Heisman Trophy winner and NFL quarterback, posted a lengthy defense of Sanders on social media. He broke down the film, showed how the protection collapsed, and explained that Sanders was actually making the right decision by trying to extend the play rather than taking a sack. Griffin emphasized that ball security needs improvement, but that the fumble happened because Sanders was trying to make a play for his team, not because he was reckless or careless. Ryan Clark, the former NFL safety who now works as an analyst, went even further. During an ESPN segment, Clark passionately argued that the narrative around Sanders' fumble exposes everything wrong with how media and fans evaluate young quarterbacks. He pointed out that when veteran quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen fumble in pressure situations, it's explained away as part of their aggressive playing style. But when rookies like Sanders make the exact same mistake, suddenly it's evidence that they're not ready for the NFL. Clark called it hypocritical and urged fans to show more patience with developing quarterbacks. The Athletic's NFL insiders provided perhaps the most balanced analysis. They reported that while the fumble was obviously costly, scouts and executives around the league who have watched Sanders' film remain impressed with his overall trajectory. Multiple anonymous NFL evaluators told The Athletic that Sanders has shown more poise and decision-making ability in his first month as a starter than most fifth-round quarterbacks demonstrate in their entire careers. One executive specifically said that if Sanders were available in a trade, at least 10 teams would immediately make offers because they see legitimate franchise potential. But the most explosive media reaction came from an unexpected source, Colin Cowherd. During his radio show, Cowherd made a stunning observation that nobody else in sports media was discussing. He suggested that the Browns' veteran players, particularly their defensive stars, needed to publicly support Sanders if they genuinely believed in him as their future quarterback. Cowherd argued that organizations reveal their true culture and how they respond to young players making mistakes, and that Cleveland needed a vocal leader to step forward and protect their rookie quarterback from the media feeding frenzy. Cowherd didn't know it at the time, but his commentary was about to become prophetic, because while sports media was debating Sanders' future, inside the Browns facility, Myles Garrett was preparing to do exactly what Cowherd suggested, take a public stand that would completely shift the narrative. Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio reported that multiple sources indicated Browns players were frustrated with how quickly media had turned on Sanders. These sources suggested that the locker room believed the fumble was being blown out of proportion and that veteran leadership was preparing to address the situation publicly. Florio's report hinted that something significant was brewing, but nobody predicted how forcefully Myles Garrett would defend his rookie quarterback. Local Cleveland reporters began noticing something interesting during the days following the fumble. Garrett, who typically focuses on his own defensive performance in media availabilities, kept getting asked about the offense and about Sanders specifically. And every time the question came up, Garrett deflected. He refused to discuss the fumble in detail. He gave short, cryptic answers that suggested he was preparing a more comprehensive response. Sports Illustrated published a piece examining the broader context of rookie quarterback development and how critical fumbles in pressure situations can either destroy a young player's confidence or become the foundation for future growth.
The article cited numerous examples of Hall of Fame quarterbacks who made devastating turnovers early in their careers, but used those mistakes as learning opportunities. The implication was clear. How the Browns handle Sanders in the aftermath of this fumble will determine whether he develops into a legitimate NFL starter or becomes another draft bust who never recovered from early adversity. And then, just when the media narrative seemed completely settled, just when everyone had decided that Shedeur Sanders made an inexcusable mistake that raised legitimate questions about his NFL readiness, Myles Garrett decided he'd heard enough. The highest-paid defensive player in the league history, the face of the Cleveland Browns, was about to hold a press conference that would change everything.
Before we get to what Myles Garrett said that sent shockwaves through the NFL, we need to understand how former players and legendary voices were reacting to this controversy, because their perspectives reveal something crucial about the culture of accountability, leadership, and how the greatest players in football history view mistakes made by rookies trying to survive in the most unforgiving league in sports. Troy Aikman, the Hall of Fame quarterback who won 3 Super Bowl championships with the Dallas Cowboys, was asked about Sanders' fumble during a radio interview. Aikman's response was surprisingly empathetic. He admitted that he made countless fumbles and interceptions early in his own career, mistakes that could have derailed his confidence if his teammates hadn't protected him during those vulnerable moments. Aikman specifically mentioned that his offensive line and veteran leaders on those Cowboys teams created an environment where young players felt safe making mistakes as long as they learned from them. He suggested that if Cleveland wants Sanders to develop into a franchise quarterback, they need veteran players to publicly support him right now when he's at his lowest point. Peyton Manning, speaking during a podcast appearance, offered a masterclass in quarterback psychology. Manning explained that the worst thing that can happen to a developing quarterback isn't making mistakes. It's making mistakes and then feeling isolated from teammates who lose faith in you. He described his own rookie season with the Colts when he threw an NFL record 28 interceptions and how veteran players on that team constantly reminded him that they believed in his potential despite the catastrophic turnovers. Manning emphasized that one fumble doesn't define a quarterback's career, but how an organization responds to that fumble absolutely defines whether that quarterback will develop confidence or crumble under pressure. Warren Moon, the Hall of Fame quarterback who overcame decades of discrimination to become one of the most respected signal callers in NFL history, took an even stronger stance. Moon posted on social media that the criticism of Shedeur Sanders was disproportionate and rooted in the fact that Sanders is a rookie with a famous last name who's being held to impossible standards. Moon pointed out that Patrick Mahomes, who everyone now considers the greatest quarterback in football, had multiple fumbles in pressure situations during his first few seasons as a starter. The difference is that Kansas City's veteran leaders protected Mahomes, built his confidence, and created an environment where he felt empowered to be aggressive, even when mistakes happened. Kurt Warner, who might understand Sanders' situation better than anyone given his own journey from undrafted to Super Bowl MVP, delivered perhaps the most powerful commentary. During an NFL Network segment, Warner became visibly emotional discussing how devastating fumbles can be for young quarterbacks. He described the shame, the embarrassment, the feeling that you've let down every teammate who's fighting alongside you. Warner then made a crucial point. The quarterbacks who survive those moments and become great are almost always the ones who had veteran teammates step up and take the blame publicly, even when it wasn't their fault. Warner suggested that if Cleveland has genuine leaders in that locker room, now is the time for them to prove it by protecting their rookie quarterback from the media firestorm. Michael Irvin, the Hall of Fame receiver and Deion Sanders' former Cowboys teammate, brought an entirely different energy to the conversation. Irvin went on an impassioned rant defending Shedeur Sanders, pointing out that Deion's son has been playing with poise and maturity beyond his years. Irvin acknowledged the fumble was costly, but argued that anyone criticizing Sanders for trying to make a play while under immediate pressure doesn't understand football.
He specifically called out media members who've never played the game for judging split-second decisions made by a rookie quarterback facing NFL-caliber pass rushers. Irvin's message was clear. Shedeur Sanders is going to be a star in this league, and this fumble will be nothing more than a footnote in what becomes a successful career. Then came the defensive players, and their perspectives added crucial context to what was building inside the Browns' locker room. Ray Lewis, the legendary Ravens linebacker, posted a video message directly addressing young players who make mistakes in critical moments. Lewis didn't mention Sanders by name, but the message was obvious. He talked about how championship teams are built on veterans protecting young players, how leadership means taking responsibility even when it's not your fault, and how the greatest locker rooms in NFL history were defined by players who refused to let their teammates face criticism alone. J.J. Watt, the future Hall of Fame defensive end who retired just recently, offered insight into the defensive player's perspective on situations like this. Watt explained that when defensive stars see their rookie quarterback getting destroyed by media for one fumble, it creates a choice: stay silent and let the narrative destroy the young player's confidence, or step up and redirect the blame toward the real systemic issues. Watt suggested that truly elite defensive players understand their voices carry more weight than anyone else in the building, and that using that platform to protect teammates is what separates good players from legendary leaders. Shannon Sharpe, never one to mince words, went on undisputed and made a stunning declaration. He said that if he were still playing and saw his rookie quarterback taking all the blame for a fumble that happened because the offensive line failed, he would march into the next press conference and put the entire organization on blast. Sharpe argued that protection breakdowns are coaching failures, personnel failures, and veteran player failures, not rookie quarterback failures. He challenged Cleveland's veteran leaders to step up and take responsibility for putting Sanders in an impossible situation. Former Browns legend Joe Thomas, the Hall of Fame offensive tackle who spent his entire career in Cleveland, offered perhaps the most poignant perspective. Thomas admitted that he felt personally responsible every time a quarterback got hit during his playing career, and that watching Sanders fumble after a protection breakdown brought back memories of times when he failed to protect his own quarterbacks. Thomas then made a powerful statement: if Cleveland's current offensive linemen aren't feeling devastated about allowing pressure that led to the fumble, they don't understand what it means to play that position. He suggested that the offensive line should be taking far more public responsibility for what happened. But the most significant reaction from a former player came from someone who once wore the same Browns uniform that Shedeur Sanders now wears. Bernie Kosar, the beloved former Browns quarterback who knows exactly what it's like to be blamed for Cleveland's failures, released a statement defending Sanders and urging Browns fans to show patience. Kosar pointed out that he made catastrophic mistakes during his own career in Cleveland, and that the only reason he survived those moments was because his teammates publicly supported him when media and fans turned hostile. All of these legendary voices were essentially saying the same thing: Shedeur Sanders needs his veteran teammates to step up right now. He needs leaders in that Browns locker room to publicly take some of the blame, redirect the narrative, and create space for a young quarterback to learn from his mistake without being crushed by the weight of criticism. And that's exactly what Myles Garrett was about to do.
The Cleveland Browns' organizational response to Shedeur Sanders' fumble started exactly the way you'd expect from a franchise that's dealt with decades of quarterback chaos. Cautiously, politically, and with carefully worded statements designed to say absolutely nothing while appearing to say something. Kevin Stefanski held his standard post-game press conference, and his answers about the fumble were textbook NFL coach speak. He acknowledged that turnovers are critical in close games. He said the coaching staff would review the film and address the protection breakdown. He praised Sanders for his overall performance, but admitted that ball security needs to improve. Everything Stefanski said was technically correct, but it offered zero insight into how the organization actually felt about their rookie quarterback's costly mistake. When reporters pressed Stefanski about whether Sanders would remain the starter moving forward, the head coach became noticeably evasive. He said the team evaluates every position every week, and that decisions would be made based on what gives Cleveland the best chance to win. That non-answer sent immediate shockwaves through the media landscape. Was Stefanski suggesting Sanders might get benched? Was this the beginning of yet another quarterback controversy in Cleveland? The ambiguity created exactly the kind of uncertainty that destroys young quarterbacks' confidence. Andrew Berry, the Browns' general manager, was even more silent. He declined to make any public statements about the fumble or about Sanders' status. League sources reported that Berry had been in closed-door meetings with ownership and coaching staff, presumably discussing contingency plans if Sanders' confidence is shattered or if the organization decides they can't trust a fifth-round rookie in playoff-critical games. That silence from the front office spoke volumes about the institutional panic that was setting in. But behind the scenes, something entirely different was happening. Multiple sources within the Browns organization reported that the locker room atmosphere in the days following the fumble was surprisingly supportive of Sanders. Veteran players were frustrated, not with their rookie quarterback, but with how quickly the organization seemed willing to question him after one mistake. There was reportedly tension between players who wanted the coaching staff to publicly defend Sanders and a front office that was trying to manage the political fallout of another loss in a season where playoff hopes were slipping away. The offensive line, which had allowed the pressure that led to the fumble, held their internal meeting. According to sources, the veteran linemen took collective responsibility for the protection breakdown. They acknowledged that Sanders was put in an impossible situation and that the fumble was as much their failure as his. But here's the problem. That accountability stayed inside the locker room. None of the offensive linemen made public statements taking blame. None of them redirected media criticism away from their rookie quarterback. The support existed privately, but publicly, Sanders was still facing the narrative alone. That's when things started getting interesting on the defensive side of the ball. Myles Garrett, who had been relatively quiet in the immediate aftermath of the game, was having conversations with other defensive leaders about how they should respond. Multiple sources indicated that Garrett was frustrated with how the organization was handling the situation. He believed Sanders deserved public support from veteran players, not carefully worded non-answers from coaches who were worried about job security. The Browns held a team meeting 2 days after the fumble, and what happened in that meeting has been described by multiple sources as one of the most intense and emotional moments of Cleveland's entire season. Garrett reportedly stood up in front of the entire team and delivered an impassioned speech about accountability, leadership, and what it means to protect your teammates. He didn't call out coaches or front office executives by name, but his message was clear. If veteran players don't step up and take public responsibility for systemic failures, young players like Sanders will be destroyed by media narratives before they ever get a chance to develop. Other defensive veterans, including players who've been with the Browns for multiple seasons, echoed Garrett's sentiments. They pointed out that the defense has been carrying the team all season, that offensive struggles go far beyond one rookie quarterback's fumble, and that if Cleveland wants to build a winning culture, veteran players need to stop hiding behind generic statements and start showing genuine leadership. Kevin Stefanski was reportedly in attendance for that team meeting, and sources suggest he was taken aback by how forcefully the defensive players defended Sanders. The head coach had been preparing to potentially make changes at quarterback, or at least create competition, but the overwhelming support from the locker room, particularly from franchise cornerstones like Garrett, made that political calculus far more complicated.
The Browns' social media team, interestingly, started posting content that seemed designed to rebuild Sanders' confidence. They shared highlight clips of his successful plays from earlier in the season. They posted messages about young quarterbacks overcoming adversity. They created graphics celebrating his college achievements at Colorado. It was subtle, but it represented an organizational pivot from the initial cautious response to something that looked more like genuine support. Then came the roster decisions, and this is where Cleveland's actions revealed their true intentions. Despite all the speculation about potential quarterback changes, the Browns made zero moves to bring in veteran competition or to adjust their depth chart. Sanders remained the starter. The coaching staff announced he would get first-team reps in practice all week, and Andrew Berry, who had been silent publicly, reportedly told the coaching staff privately that the organization remained committed to Sanders' development regardless of short-term mistakes. But the most significant organizational response came from an unexpected place: the equipment staff and support personnel around the team. Multiple sources reported that trainers, equipment managers, and other behind-the-scenes employees went out of their way to show support for Sanders during practice that week. They encouraged him. They told him everyone in the building believed in him. They created an environment where the rookie quarterback felt valued despite making a catastrophic error on national television. That groundswell of support, from the lowest-level employees to franchise defensive superstars, created momentum that was building towards something significant. The Browns weren't just protecting Sanders with generic statements anymore. They were actively creating a culture where veteran leadership was expected to step up publicly and defend young players who needed protection. And Myles Garrett, who had been the catalyst for much of this internal support, was preparing to take that message public in a way that would completely change the narrative around Shedeur Sanders' fumble. The highest-paid defensive player in NFL history was about to hold a press conference that would define Cleveland's culture for the rest of the season and potentially for years to come. What Garrett said next shocked everyone who heard it.
Myles Garrett walked into that press conference and did something that almost never happens in modern professional football. He took full responsibility for a mistake that wasn't his to own. "That fumble, that's on all of us, not just Shedeur," Garrett said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I'm tired of watching a rookie quarterback get torn apart by media when the real issue is that we, as veteran players, as leaders on this team, haven't done enough to put him in position to succeed. The protection broke down, the offensive line got beat, and instead of everyone pointing fingers at a fifth-round pick who's out there fighting for his life, maybe we should be asking why our veteran players aren't taking more accountability." The room went silent. Reporters looked at each other in disbelief. This wasn't the standard, "we all need to be better," generic teammate support. This was Myles Garrett, the face of the Cleveland Browns franchise, directly challenging the narrative and refusing to let his rookie quarterback carry the blame alone. But Garrett wasn't finished. He continued, his intensity building with every sentence. "Shedeur Sanders has shown more heart and more toughness in 4 starts than most quarterbacks show in 4 seasons. He's taken hits that would break other rookies. He's made throws under pressure that prove he belongs in this league. And one fumble, one mistake in a situation where he was getting pressured immediately because we didn't protect him adequately doesn't erase everything he's proven. If anyone in this building or in this city wants to criticize him, they need to go through me first, because I'm not letting a young player get destroyed for trying to make a play when everything around him was breaking down." The immediate reaction on social media was explosive. Players across the NFL started retweeting Garrett's comments. Former players praised him for showing the kind of leadership that builds championship cultures. Fans who had been criticizing Sanders suddenly had to reconsider their positions because one of the most respected players in football was staking his reputation on defending the rookie. So what does this really mean?
What does Myles Garrett's refusal to let Shedeur Sanders take the blame actually reveal about the Cleveland Browns, about NFL culture, and about what it takes to develop young quarterbacks in the modern era? First, it means that Cleveland might actually have the foundation of something special. Championship teams aren't built just on talent. They're built on culture. They're built on veteran players who understand that protecting your teammates, especially young players who are vulnerable to media destruction, is more important than protecting your own image. Garrett could have stayed silent. He could have given generic support. Instead, he used his platform as the highest-paid defensive player in NFL history to fundamentally shift the narrative around Sanders' mistake. Think about what that does for Sanders' confidence moving forward. Imagine being a rookie quarterback who just made the worst mistake of your young career, who's been getting destroyed by media and fans, who's questioning whether you even belong in the NFL. And then the franchise's biggest star, a four-time All-Pro who has zero obligation to defend you, stands up in front of cameras and essentially tells the entire football world that anyone who wants to criticize you has to go through him first. That's the kind of support that transforms careers. That's the kind of leadership that allows young players to develop without the crippling fear of making mistakes. Second, it exposes something crucial about how NFL organizations handle adversity. The Browns' coaching staff and front office initially responded with caution and political calculation. They were worried about optics, worried about fan reaction, worried about protecting their own jobs. But the locker room, led by Garrett, forced a different response. The players demanded that the organization support their rookie quarterback publicly, not just privately. And Garrett's press conference essentially backed the front office into a corner where they had no choice but to fully commit to Sanders moving forward. That player-driven accountability is rare in the NFL. Usually, front offices control the narrative. Coaches decide which players get public support and which players get thrown under the bus. But in Cleveland, the players seized control of that narrative and forced the organization to align with their values. That's powerful, and it suggests that the Browns might have a locker room culture that's more advanced than their organizational structure. Third, it raises fascinating questions about what happens next for Shedeur Sanders. Will Garrett's public support translate into improved play? Will Sanders feel empowered to be more aggressive, knowing that his teammates have his back unconditionally? Or will the pressure of living up to Garrett's faith in him create even more anxiety? These are the psychological dynamics that determine whether quarterbacks develop into stars or crumble under expectations. Here's what we know from history. The quarterbacks who become great are almost always the ones who had veteran teammates willing to take public blame for their mistakes. Tom Brady had that in New England. Peyton Manning had that in Indianapolis. Matt Mahomes has that in Kansas City. And now Shedeur Sanders has that in Cleveland, thanks to Garrett's willingness to put his reputation on the line. But there's also a darker possibility that needs to be addressed. What if Garrett's support creates complacency? What if Sanders interprets this protection as permission to not hold himself accountable? What if the Browns organization becomes so focused on building Sanders' confidence that they fail to address legitimate technical issues with his ball security and decision-making? That's the tightrope every organization walks when supporting young quarterbacks. The fumble itself, in isolation, isn't that significant. Rookie quarterbacks make mistakes. Protection breaks down. Turnovers happen. But what makes this situation extraordinary is what it revealed about the Cleveland Browns' locker room culture and about Myles Garrett's understanding of what true leadership actually means. Garrett understands something that many players never figure out. Your legacy isn't just determined by sacks and all-pro selections. It's determined by how you use your platform to impact the careers of players around you. Garrett could have been remembered as a dominant pass rusher who accumulated impressive statistics. Now he has the opportunity to be remembered as the leader who protected a young quarterback when everyone else was ready to give up on him, as the veteran who understood that championship cultures are built on loyalty and accountability, not blame and political calculation. For Shedeur Sanders, this is a defining moment. He now has to prove that Garrett's faith in him was not misplaced. He has to demonstrate that he can learn from the fumble without being paralyzed by fear of making future mistakes. He has to show that he deserves the kind of unconditional support that Garrett just provided. The pressure is enormous, but it's also the kind of pressure that forges great quarterbacks. For the Browns organization, this moment forces a critical decision. Are they going to commit fully to Sanders as their quarterback of the future, or are they going to continue hedging and creating uncertainty? Garrett's public defense makes it almost impossible for Cleveland to bench Sanders without creating a massive rift in the locker room. The players have spoken. The defensive leaders have made their position clear. Now the front office and coaching staff have to decide whether they trust their locker room's judgment or whether they're going to prioritize short-term wins over long-term culture building. And for the NFL as a whole, this situation serves as a reminder that the NFL's culture around young quarterbacks is often toxic and counterproductive. We celebrate veterans when they put up statistics, but we rarely celebrate them when they sacrifice their own image to protect developing players. Garrett just showed what genuine leadership looks like, and it's a standard that should be applied across the entire league.
Now it's your turn to weigh in, because this story is about more than just one fumble or one press conference. This is about the future of the Cleveland Browns and about what kind of culture they're building in that locker room. First question, do you think Myles Garrett did the right thing by publicly defending Shedeur Sanders and taking blame for the fumble? Or should he have let the rookie face the criticism and learn from the adversity without veteran intervention? Second question, will Garrett's support make Shedeur Sanders a better quarterback, or will it create pressure that makes it even harder for him to perform without fear of letting down the teammate who defended him? Third question, if you were Andrew Berry, the Browns' general manager, how would you handle this situation moving forward? Do you commit fully to Sanders as your franchise quarterback, or do you bring in competition and let him earn the job without guarantees? And finally, is this the moment that defines Cleveland's culture and separates them from decades of dysfunction? Or is this just another temporary feel-good story that ultimately doesn't change the Browns' pattern of quarterback failures? Drop your answers in the comments right now. Smash that like button if you think Myles Garrett is the kind of leader every young quarterback needs in the NFL. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we're going to be following Shedeur Sanders' development closely, and we'll be here to break down every game, every decision, and every moment that determines whether he becomes the franchise quarterback Cleveland has been desperately searching for. This channel is committed to telling the real stories that mainstream sports media ignores. We're not here to repeat generic talking points or to pile on young players when they make mistakes. We're here to examine the deeper cultural dynamics that determine which organizations succeed and which organizations continue failing year after year. Myles Garrett just showed us what leadership looks like. Now we get to watch whether that leadership translates into success on the field, whether Shedeur Sanders rises to meet the moment, and whether the Cleveland Browns finally break their decades-long curse of quarterback dysfunction. Stay locked in, keep the conversation going in the comments, and let's watch together as this story continues to unfold over the coming weeks and months.